Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I have an interview for you today with Daphne Delvaux, the mama attorney. She is sharing all of her incredible wisdom around women's and parents' rights in the workplace, how we can navigate the fertility journey, asking for accommodations and time off. But what are your rights? What is the law? What is the policy? And how do we protect ourselves in these conversations? How do we advocate for what we want? I definitely learned a lot. Obviously, being in Canada, things are a little bit different than any of you guys listening that are in the US. So if you are Canadian like myself, some of these pieces might be slightly different, but the general info is the same in terms of figuring out what is your rights in your area and what rights do you have with your employers and how to make sure that you are protecting yourself on the journey. So it was a really wonderful, enlightening conversation. I feel like I learned so much in terms of languaging and questions to ask and how to help clients, especially navigate these times. But if you want to learn more about the legal side of this conversations and your employer rights, you can check out more about Daphne over on her website, The Mama Attorney, which I'll link below. Find her on Instagram at The Mama Attorney, and check out her Liberated Mother portal, which is her program where she's going to just walk you through all of these aspects of your rights, both through the fertility journey, but also through navigating parental leave when you are successful as well. Hello, Daphne. Welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
I am super excited to kind of dig into our topic today, but why don't we start with you just telling our listeners a little bit about you?
I'm a lawyer and a mother with a devotion to other mothers and babies. So my core mission is to protect mothers and babies and the whole process of motherhood as it relates to the workplace. And I do that by teaching women what their rights are, how to use them without sacrificing their ambitions. So I'm at that really tricky, tender place of how do we navigate our workplace when we also want to grow our family? Often, when our career is in the upswing, we finally get some momentum. That window tends to overlap with our childbearing years, which is this cruel cosmic joke, but it's what it is. Yeah. So it's like, how do we handle all of these longings, desires, demands, responsibilities at the same time? That's where I live, in that tricky place.
I was going to say, with lots of moving pieces and changing things. And yeah, for sure. So I love this for us as a fertility community because people ask me these types of things in my community all the time in terms of navigating like new jobs. What should I ask employers? Do I have benefits? Do I not? And I'd love to just start with like understanding what are our rights as women who are potentially going through IVF or medicated cycles, or what that looks like when it pertains to the workplace.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about this because I feel like no one is really talking about it in a comprehensive way. Because, yes, there are a lot of questions about this topic. And I'll tell you that most employers don't know this and most employees don't know this. I think we generally know, for example, pregnancy discrimination is illegal. Like that's one of those things that we tend to know. But when it comes to fertility, it's a bit just of it's a bit of a time where there's so much ambiguity and also often a lot of confusion and a lot of shame even for women who feel like they can't really speak about this freely in the workplace, which is such a bummer. So fertility in the legal sense or the fertility issues is considered a disability. And this may sound a little ominous or like, oof, but disability in the legal context just means that there's limitations. So that there's limitations, whether to time, to physicality, or to the ability to conduct work in the regular sense. So we don't want to take this too personally. And we just like childbirth recovery is disability time, pregnancy can be disability. It means there are some limitations, something that is pushing back against the employee being fully and always available, which is a good thing. We don't want to have boundaries. So because this falls in the bucket of disability, this is actually a key to a whole world of rights and protections. that actually are even broader sometimes than motherhood protections, because I think we all know kind of the frustrating, abysmal state of bonding leave, parental leave issues. But when it comes to disability, the US is actually an outlier and is actually at the top of legal protections in the whole world. So on the global scale, there are more protections in the US for women going through fertility treatment and struggles than there are in most European nations. So this, first of all, is kind of shocking to most people because they assume they have no rights. They assume they have to just kind of push through it. And I'm here to tell you, not at all. In fact, you're in the right place. Ironically, you're in the exact right place to have this experience, because when you have a disability, what you can do is you can ask for accommodations. And these accommodations existed previous to the passing of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which I'll talk about in a moment. But these accommodations existed under the ADA. We tend to think of the ADA as like the wheelchair law, right? Like that makes companies put in wheelchair ramps, but it is much broader than that. And also applies in the workplace. And it also covers any accommodation needs that we may have for time off, for nausea, for exhaustion that can come up during the fertility treatment period. So if you are really uncomfortable and you feel bloated, or you have a ton of appointments that are back to back, when they start checking the ovaries and follicles, and it's like almost everyday appointments, and you have all of these injections, you don't have to suffer through that. You don't have to go do that in the office bathroom. You can ask to work remotely. You can ask for flexibility. You can be honest about what's going on. And a lot of women are nervous about telling their employers they're doing fertility treatments, because it's almost like a commitment that there will be a pregnancy, right? It's like a promise of a future pregnancy.
Right.
But I want women to remember that it can actually be riskier not to be honest about it. And the reason for that is if you are struggling physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and that is reflecting in your work product, or the way you're showing up at work, and you're missing work, you're really actually putting your job at risk even more. Now, if your employer knows that you are going through this and you requested accommodations or support, you're in a protected class. And that means that if something shady happens to you, at least you have recourse. At least there's something that you can do about it. And we want to remember that our jobs are kind of always at risk. Like there's always mass layoffs happening. So I think in service of your own body, it's essential, and your future baby, it's essential that you ask for the support that you need during the most vulnerable time of your life. The law has your back. It allows for it. So we better use it. So this used to be under the ADA. Now these rights are protected under the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. I know this sounds confusing because it's Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, but it also includes anything related to pregnancy, to include fertility. So this law is a little bit more generous, a little bit broader, and it is essentially an expansion of the ADA that allows us to, again, ask for time off, for flexibility, for remote work, for more breaks, to be excused from a work trip, just anything that you may need that would allow your journey to be easier.
Right. And I have a lot of clients who I think having this conversation will be so important for them, because they, are in the thick of their journey and they live 3 hours from their clinic. And so in order for them to get there, it is a day off. It is needing to take time. And that is a huge, huge stress on anyone really who needs to try to ask for things, but understanding where your rights are. And I love that you shared that, even if you're nervous about being open with your journey, it actually probably is more beneficial for you, not just to get accommodation, but to at least have people understand where you're coming from a little bit more if you are having an off day or an off week. And just being more open and honest, I think will make everyone just a bit more comfortable, hopefully, in the workplace as well.
Absolutely. And what I see women do is they ask for PTO or vacation time, and that can be a risky move because PTO is limited. It's also not protected. So you can absolutely lose your job or be impacted by using PTO or by exceeding attendance policies, like being late to work because you had an appointment. Like the more that you can use medical language, the more your job is going to be protected. And it's true, I think, also from a physical and mental stance. When you can be honest with the people around you, you're going to have less stress in your system, which in the
Right.
end will really support you as well.
Yeah, you're not hiding something. You're not feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells around the workplace too, if you feel like you're keeping this big, big secret. For women who might be nervous about having this conversation, how would you recommend opening that up with their employer?
Well, there's no easy way to say it. If this is a sensitive topic, sometimes it's easier to first go to human resources. So there's like HR is going to be more prepared to know these rules, to know these
Right.
accommodations, and then HR can support you in navigating the accommodations with your direct manager. But if you have a manager that you trust, um, I would just tell them like, hey, I just want you to know that I'm going through a fertility journey right now, and it's stressful, but I'm also feeling confident. And this is important. I want you to know that I will minimize any disruptions in the workplace because my job is very important to me. Often, when bosses hear fertility or even pregnancy, they feel like it's the beginning of the end. They feel like the woman may leave or quit or have a baby and never
Mhm.
come back. So it's really vital. And I tell this to all mothers I work with to reinforce that you like your job, that you've invested in this employer, that you're loyal to this employer, and that you this is your job's important to you, that you enjoy the the mission, that you enjoy working there, you enjoy the camaraderie. Um, and then having an open dialogue about what it means specifically in terms of time. So anytime there's anything related to fertility or pregnancy, the employer is just going to be concerned about the time that that might take. So the more that you can provide them with a schedule and say,
Right.
this is how I propose we handle this, the easier it is for your employer to grant it, because the employer doesn't know what you need. And in fact, the
Right.
employer may be a little bit nervous because it's so sensitive, right? And the
Mhm.
employer may be nervous to make suggestions or to make changes because they don't want to offend you. They don't know what you need. So it's always easier to come prepared with your own plan and to say, this is what I need. This is how we're going to do this. And the more empowered that you are, the more sturdy that you are, the easier it is to move through this in a collaborative, trusted way. But when you go to your employer and you tell them, I'm going through fertility issues, but I don't know what, and if you come with them with a lot of doubt and fear of like, I don't know what this means, I don't know if I'll feel well, they're going to start spiraling with you and they're not going to
Right.
know how to best support you. So the best thing to do is actually write out your conversation, and you're free to email it to them if it's hard to do this in person, but then like
Mhm.
call them afterwards and say like, let me know if you want to talk about this. But having it written out in advance, um, and also anticipating what they might say, and then already thinking of how to rebut that or how to respond to that, so that you just create your own roadmap of how you want to run this conversation and staying in charge of the conversation. And also being really firm, right? Like we want to be kind and professional, but these are your rights. An employer is not allowed to not follow the law, right? It would be like saying, like, oh, I'm just going to choose to drive through the red light. Like there's rules in place to protect your body right now and protect your experience. So we have to be firm in those as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And from the legal aspect, what would you recommend women do after these conversations to make sure that like if they don't go as planned, what would be the next step for them?
So it's really important to always document these conversations, make sure that you have double, triple copies of everything, put everything in writing, and make sure that you BCC your personal email address. That's really important because if you are emailing from your work email address, you may actually lose access at one point if you're on leave
Right.
or if you're terminated. So if the conversation doesn't go well, what I tend to do with the mothers I work with is I have them actually cite the laws in their emails or have a copy to the law, like a link to what the law
Mhm.
says or a link to the EEOC guidance on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, because it's not disputable, right? There shouldn't be a back and forth as to whether or not you have rights. Now, employers, because this is an accommodation process, they are allowed to ask some questions. They are allowed to try to get to some sort of system and structure that works for everyone. This is a little bit different than when we ask for a leave of absence, which you can also do, by the way. But I don't recommend that as a first step because you want to save your leave for when the baby comes. So while you are in this accommodation process of trying to see how we can all work together, you do want to collaborate and answer questions. And one thing that's really important for women to understand is you cannot both have full privacy and also the protection of the law. Like you need to choose. If you want this to be a private experience that is completely separate from the workplace, then you have to push through any discomfort. That's a choice that you make. But this impacts your workplace. And I think the more we can be honest about that and confident, the more that we can also protect our own experience.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like having kind of a option A, this is my best case scenario of how I feel accommodations in the workplace can assist me in continuing to do my job to the best of my ability, as well as go through my journey, but also potentially having like a plan B as a way in terms of negotiating so that you know what am I not willing to give up in terms of the accommodations I'm asking for and what am I willing to sort of compromise on so that everyone can come out of this conversation hopefully happy at the end of the day.
Exactly. An accommodation process is a negotiation. So you're going to start with what like what you want the most, and then you may end up somewhere in the middle. But let's say so it also is job specific. So if you have a job that's a remote computer job, and you're asking for appointments, time off, and then you're going to say, I'll finish up the work in the evening. Like that shouldn't be a no. That should be a very, very simple, easy yes. But if you are a teacher and you have appointments every day for a whole week, it's a little bit tougher to accommodate. And in that scenario, you may actually want to take a leave of absence. So the last option is that you actually ask for a leave of absence, but we just don't want to go there first because again, you may be losing out that time on the back end. So I'm always really protective of that leave bank because we want to use that for when your baby is here. So that's why we always try the accommodation process first because it's a limited time, and most women don't just want to sit at home, right? Like you want to have something to do. Something that's really important too is to know that if you ask for accommodations or a leave of absence, that you're protected from retaliation, even if it's not granted, even if you never come to that compromise, even if you have a hard time taking time off, like it is a protected ask. When it comes to a leave of absence, such as an FMLA leave, which you can also take for fertility, by the way, recovery or any of the treatments, including all of the fertility appointments, that is something that should not be a negotiation. That is an absolute right as long as you're eligible. So you just tell them the times you're going to be gone and then you just leave. There is nothing an employer can do about that. So if you're struggling getting through the accommodation process and you're like, oh, I just don't want to deal with it, then you can absolutely fall back on your leave rights. And your leave rights are going to depend on where you live. It's a little bit of winning the zip code lottery, honestly, because they're so specific to where you live and how big your employer is. So that's not something that we'll have time to kind of run through on this call. Yeah. I do have all of this laid out in a program that I run, in a membership program, like all of the state leave rights and stuff. But you should know that you can take medical leave for fertility treatments and recovery as well.
Yeah, that's good to know. Okay, so let's say we have someone who's already kind of in their fertility journey cycles and they're switching jobs for whatever reason. What are some questions that they should maybe be asking their future employers in terms of how this would look in the workplace? Should they be bringing this up in the interview? How do we ask about fertility benefits and those types of things?
That's a good one. I wish we were at a place culturally where we could do that, right? Where we could tell a prospective employer like, hey, I want to start a family. I don't recommend it just because of the nature of discrimination. And specifically because usually the recruiters are not your direct bosses. So
Right.
often women are like, I don't want to work at a workplace if they don't support me, but you might be going through like an external vendor, like a
Third party.
recruiter,
Yeah,
or
totally.
sometimes even like an AI program. So you don't want to create all these scenarios that might uh, exclude you, because that's what it can happen. And of course, it's illegal to deny a job applicant based on fertility. That's something that's really hard to prove
Right. Yeah.
because there's so many variables. So these like failure to hire cases are really hard to win. I've taken like only a few of them over many years.
Yeah.
So instead, what we're going to do is we're not going to talk about fertility or family planning. We're going to ask about benefits in a really holistic way. And this is the same advice I give as to like asking for maternity benefits, is you're just going to ask for a bigger, like just kind of what are the benefits. So, right, like we ask for retirement benefits, we ask for healthcare benefits so that it's on the list, but it's one of the topics. It's one of the issues that we're discussing as opposed to like the main pointed question.
The
A
only
second
one. Yeah.
recommendation is to ask for a handbook, and you can frame it as like, I'd love to study the ethos of the company. I'd love to study the mission of the company. Like, would you be open to giving me a handbook so that I can take a look at how the company operates and how I can best support the company with my talents?
Right.
And that's another way that we can kind of get around having to have that direct conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because this is something I always think about too with clients when we're having that conversation about switching jobs. And, they're always thinking in the back of their head of like, my current job doesn't have any sort of added benefits for fertility in our plan, but I want my new job to have that. But like, how do we have that conversation without opening up this door
Yeah.
of, oh, by the way, I'm actively trying to get pregnant, but like, please still hire me,
Yes.
essentially.
It's going to be a very rare employer that would be unfazed by that.
Right.
Unfortunately, we still,
Yeah.
are, we have to accept the reality as it is. And this is probably not the time and place for your micro revolution. There's a lot of other times and opportunities.
We will bang our
Once you
drum
have
in
the
other
job.
places.
So this is also, so for example, I don't advise pregnant women to tell their employers they're pregnant. Like I tell them to not tell them until they actually have a job offer. And at that time you can tell them, because then if the job offer is revoked, then that is absolutely illegal, but at least you can show that causation. So
Right.
same with fertility. If once you have that job offer, that's when you can tell them. And that's when you can talk about the benefits and any, like, in a more direct way.
Hey guys, our friends over at Needed have made grabbing your supplements that much easier with their Women's Complete Plan or their Fertility Support Plan, both of which you can actually customize to your personal preferences, which we love. Their Women's Complete Plan includes their popular prenatal, which you get to choose if you want their essentials, their powder, or their full force capsule option, an omega-3, either fish or vegan, their collagen, and their pre-probiotic combo. I personally take and love their pre-probiotic. As someone who has struggled with their gut, it's one that's actually made a big difference for me. A great combo to support your gut health, your inflammatory pathways, and your overall nutrient status, which we know, and you know from being Fertility Confidence podcast listeners, these things are really important when we're on our fertility journey. This power combo is going to support you not just through your fertility journey, but through your postpartum journey as well, and take all the stress out of what to start, what to stop when that time comes. So you can find Needed's complete or their fertility support plan over on thisisneeded.com and enjoy 20% off your first order with the code Dr. Kelsey. Okay, so let's say couples have gone through their journey and they've been successful.
Yay.
How do they now prepare for parental leave?
Instantly. In fact, like if most of you listeners are going through fertility, you actually want to start thinking about that now. The most successful parents and mothers I've helped are the ones that were actually actively planning their leave roadmap before pregnancy. Like those are the ones that move through it most unfazed and most protected. the worst thing we can do with parental leave is uh, procrastinate. Especially the guys who tend to like shoot off a text, "Hey, my wife's in labor." Like, can I take some time off? And they're like, "What, dude? Like, what? We have a launch, right?"
Yeah.
So instantly, meaning like when you pee on the stick. So you want to first sit down together and then before you look at any policy, which is a company perk, just like healthcare, just like retirement plan, 401k, that kind of stuff. You're going to look at your rights, and your rights are different than policy. Your rights are the time off allotted, allowable in your state. We tend to think that's 12 weeks, but that's not the same everywhere. If you are in a labor progressive state like New Jersey, Washington, California, Massachusetts, those are the top four, you're actually going to have more time off. But in most states, it's going to be around 12 weeks. And then there's like city ordinances, right? There's like all of these local laws. This issue related to employment law and our maternity laws is very, very localized. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is a federal law. But when it comes to our leave rights, time off, and benefits, it's going to again depend on winning the zip code lottery. Right. So you want to first look at what are my rights based on where I live? How much time off can I take? That's step one. And you're going to do that together, right? Like, so your partner is going to do that as well. Step two is the finances. It's how much money are we going to get, if at all? There's going to be three potential sources. First is your state. So if you live in a paid leave state, then you may be eligible for benefits as long as you paid into the fund. Two is your employer. So that's going to be through an employer policy, a paid leave policy that you'll find in the handbook. And three is through some sort of insurance. So like short-term disability insurance, which is also an employer benefit in a way, or you might have your own private short-term disability insurance. So you're going to look at all of these different sources of income and then see how you're going to do all of it, right? And then you want to create this like a Lego house of like different bricks. So for example, what I advise parents to do is for the mother to take time off. Well, for both parents to take time off when the baby just got there, to bond, to take some time to recover. And then for the dad or the other mom to go back to work. And then for the mother, the birthing mother, to go back to work. And then for the dad or the other mom to take the rest of the leave, so that you actually stagger. And when you stagger like that, you extend the time the baby's with the parent. And you also extend the time you have to pay for childcare. So most parents tend to take like their entire block of leave together and then like rush back to work. And it's like, it's really tough for the whole family. Another thing I want parents to do is look at their intermittent leave rights, which means that you can, for example, return to work part-time. There's all these options of things you can do. We tend to think of maternity leave or parental leave as it's like, I'm out of work and then I'm back at work. But there's options. Yeah. So it's like create your own leave plan. Right. And you want to do that early. And then you want to tell your employer early too. You want to say, this is what I've discovered. I understand these are my rights. I want to take advantage of this policy. I understand that I'm eligible for benefits with the state. So you want to showcase like how good of a student you are in your own rights, so that all they have to do is say, oh, okay, fine. Right? Cool, thanks. Instead of, and what the mistake parents make is entrusting their employers to figure this out for them, which really isn't their job. Your employer's job is to comply with the law, of course, but they're not deployed to maximize your leave, right? It's not a reasonable expectation. Why would they do that? It goes against their labor needs. Like, this is something that you have to figure out on your own. And then you just tell your employer, like, this is what I'm going to do. Because most people, what they do is they go to HR and they ask, what's the leave policy? Can I take
Right.
maternity leave? Blah, 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 and asking all these questions. And it's just not the right source. Like you're going to the people that are disincentivized to give you time off.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
they're going to comply with the law, hopefully, of course, but they're also not going to teach you how to make sure that you and your partner maximize time off by not working. So yeah, these are things that I teach again in my program of like, how do we actually take as much time off under the law? And how do we get benefits for that? Because our employers aren't going to teach us that.
Yeah, totally. When I was pregnant with my son, so he's 8 now. So I'm self-employed and my
Mm,
partner worked in corporate, obviously. So we always knew that like I wasn't getting a traditional maternity leave in terms of like what the government, I also live in Canada, so like very
mm,
different situation. But that he could. And so he went in to talk about what does parental leave look like? What did the company offer for top up? And the first person he spoke to was like, you're not eligible for maternity leave. That's what they kept saying.
mm,
And he was like, well, no, like it's parental leave and
mm-hmm,
I am a parent. And so they actually had to go and like figure out, they'd never had a man in the company ask to take time off. And so they had to go and figure out like, what is this? Are we allowed to do this? And ever since, he said it was so funny because he's like, now you see all of these men taking extended time off since he kind of opened
mm,
this door, because obviously in Canada we get the 12 or the 18 months and the mothers usually take all of it. It's not very common for the spouse to get some. And so, but for me, I wasn't eligible for EI. So I didn't have that traditional sense of a maternity leave. And he was able to take 6 months
mm,
off and like show the other partners in his company that, that was actually something that was allowed. And so then some of his friends were taking time off. So it was really nice to see. But it was funny because he came home one day and he was like, yeah, no, the lady said that I'm not allowed. And I was like, no, no.
yeah,
I'm
they don't
sorry, but you're gonna
understand
have to
it.
go talk to somebody else because that's
Yes.
not true.
Yeah, they don't understand it. And it's because the words can become complicated because maternity
Yeah.
leave isn't really a legal term, medical
Yeah.
leave and bonding leave is. But it's really cool that he was like a trailblazer
Yeah.
that allowed all of these babies to have more time with their parents. Like it's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Mhm.
and I love when individual advocacy results in collective change.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
the best part, right? It's like when, and a lot of the mothers in my program do that as well. Like they come up with an idea or a plan, and it ends up being a policy. It ends up benefiting everyone behind them. So it's so
Yeah.
beautiful when we can be
Yeah,
that
that's
person.
awesome. Yeah. That's what I also remind my clients as well of like, it's hard to advocate for yourself in the fertility journey in terms of like asking for labs and asking for testing and always having to be someone that's like putting themselves out there into these vulnerable conversations. But you're also doing such amazing work to help pave the way for couples that are going to come behind you in the fertility journey and walk into these clinics who are now maybe more open to thinking outside of the box and to looking deeper because they've had people asking to do it. So you really are sort of paving the way, and it makes total sense that it, continues on through their journey even when they're preparing for leave and after they're successful.
Yeah. And the best, if there's any other parents in the workplace, like if you can make a collective ask, that's always really good.
Mhm.
Forming a tiny labor union,
Yeah.
because then you're not alone. It's easier to say no to one person than to like a few.
Yeah,
I
that
just
makes
want to
sense.
speak to the part of how you said you're self-employed. Um, I don't know if this is the same in Canada, but in the US, when you're a business owner, you can actually employ yourself as an employee and then pay
Mhm.
into the system, the benefit system, and then get paid leave that way. And I find that a lot of mothers are not using that opportunity. They tend to pay themselves, they tend to classify themselves as independent contractors,
Yep.
which ends up really harming you. So anytime I speak to someone who's self-employed, I'm like, make sure you incorporate, make sure you employ yourself because you're going to be Otherwise,
right on the
missing out on
benefits
so
from
many
that.
benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely an upside here as well in terms of taking that
Yeah.
route. I did not at the beginning, but
These things we
neither here
always
nor there.
learn the hard way.
Right? Yeah. The trailblazer. No. Yeah, no, you can definitely, there's definitely
Mhm.
ways to make it a lot easier on yourself as a self-employed person. That's for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so what about for our clients who are experiencing miscarriage and loss?
Mm.
Like, how does the law help protect them in terms of bereavement leave and things like
Mm.
that?
So, first, do not ask for bereavement leave. That's actually my first piece of advice. We tend to think of miscarriage loss as a bereavement issue, which I understand from like a spiritual and mental and emotional perspective. I went through too, but in the employment context, it's a medical event. So when we ask for bereavement leave, which doesn't exist, like there's no right to it, it can be a policy, but there's no right to bereavement leave um, in the US. So what we're asking for when we ask for bereavement leave is at the best of policy that the company provides as a generosity, um, which they can reject or not, and or grant. But also, a lot of bereavement policies do not actually cover this. They're going to
Mm,
cover a spouse, a parent, a
right.
sibling. So then you get in this position, and this happens a lot, where the mother had a miscarriage and then she asks for bereavement leave, and the company's like, oh, it doesn't qualify. Like, this doesn't fall under bereavement.
Right.
And then the mother's like, oh my God, this is so cruel. But she
Right.
actually asked for the wrong question. She needs to
Right.
ask for medical leave because it's a medical event. Um,
Right.
and yeah, miscarriage loss, any loss is considered of any pregnancy is considered a requires medical recovery. So you're going to take medical leave for that, and
Right.
disability leave. And it may not feel like this is a medical issue because it's more physiological and spiritual, but yeah, like we've got to be smart with these things. And
Yeah.
again, not the time for your micro revolution. Like if you want to take time off, then the more we can speak, and this is my general advice, like motherhood is so sacred to me personally, but as a lawyer, my advice is always to speak about this in as much like medical language as you can. That's what
Right.
employers are used to. That's what they're comfortable with.
And that's how
And
the
that's also
policies are written, right?
the strongest legal protections. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we don't use the word bereavement.
We don't ask for bereavement leave.
Yeah. We use the word
How do you
medical
ask
leave.
for bereavement leave?
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah. Do not use that word. But that's really important information because that's how I would counsel somebody. Like, I didn't know that. I would totally
Yeah.
counsel someone to go in and look at, like, well, what are your rights around this? And that makes sense
Right.
that it is very employer specific and
Hmm.
could not encompass a miscarriage, which it should, right? Like,
Yes.
and I think that that's also the other part I think women really struggle with is, like you said at the beginning, like dipping into that disability loss that they have and that time, that short term disability, and like when do we use it and when do we not use it? And so working that into how this journey is going, like the fact that that has to be a consideration is also something that I just don't think anyone should have to really worry about or think
Oh, it's
about what they
horrible.
do.
It's horrible how complicated it is. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know Canada also has variants, but the US it's so patchworky. Like it's such a hodgepodge and it's complicated. You've like all of these different systems that are entangled but don't communicate with each other,
Right.
and they require like different advocacy and different assessments and different ways of navigating. And it is so because it also has the medical system component
Right.
to it. So it's like it's so complicated and it's so frustrating. And I'm doing my best, but everyone's always like frustrated. And I'm like, I get it. I get it. I wish it wasn't this hard. I mean, there's a lot of things I could do with my time. I could be like jet skiing. I could be going on a drum circle. There's all these things I could be doing, but we've got to do the best we can. So the best thing to do, just like we read, and this is always something, just got to say it bothers me because we prepare for birth. We read all the books. We prepare for parenting. We research Montessori. We research Waldorf, like all these philosophies, but we don't really prepare when it comes to the workplace. Like we just
Right.
think it's going to be like, oh, I'll figure this out. You really won't. Like you want to know in advance what is going to happen when I have a miscarriage. What am I going to say? You want to even draft. I mean, this may seem like a lot, but you want to draft emails and then have like a folder and you share it with your partner or a close friend and you say, if this happens, this is what I need you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you spell it out for them because people don't know what you need. So it's like, if this happens, help me write this email. Like, here's the language. Help me write it to my employer, or here's my boss's email address. I'm going to need you to call them or email them and tell them what's going on. So we need to be just so prepared for anything. Or like when I'm on leave and I have postpartum depression or anxiety, here's what I'm going to need. Right.
Right.
So just like when I went to the birthing classes and they talk through like everything that can happen, it was a little much, honestly, but uh, just it can be really empowering to know, to be so prepared that like whatever is going to happen, I know that I'll be fine because I'm
Right.
prepared,
Yeah.
you know, and especially with fertility, which is so replete with risk. And it's so scary. I think the best thing we can do is give our brain a task. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
okay, I'm going to figure this out. Like, not when it happens, because that's the worst time. And this happens a
Right.
lot. It's like mid miscarriage at the hospital. We're texting our boss, and our boss, like, I didn't even know you're pregnant. So it's another reason why I advise people to give notice of pregnancy early, because
Right.
otherwise you don't have those protections. I just
Right.
want to circle back really quickly to bereavement leave,
Yeah.
because bereavement leave is not a protected ask. So if you're going to ask for bereavement leave without telling your employer you had a miscarriage, that is again like not protected. So instead, we do actually want to tell them that we had a miscarriage and then ask for medical leave. So just be really honest about that.
Very
It's the only way
clear.
it's
Yeah.
protected. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. This was a very enlightening conversation for me, and I feel like there's so many, like, other little nuances and
Yeah.
things that we could get into, but I would love, Daphne, if you could just share a little bit about your program and where women could maybe start looking into the policies and laws in their area so that they can start making these plans for themselves.
Yes. So I have all of this done. Like I have all of this laid out. It's my program is called the Liberated Mother Society. My Instagram is the Mom Attorney. And yeah, come find me there. And I have a law firm as well, which is devoted to women's rights at work. But mainly what I do these days is educational and helping women not be in a lawsuit. I don't recommend it. So
Yeah.
just like teaching them how to anticipate what might go wrong by doing everything right, by being really upfront and confident and sturdy. You've got to remember that, because even this conversation, I think sometimes I'm worried that this is all really scary. It's so much more likely that things will go right. But
Right.
where I see things wrong is when women are not prepared and they say the wrong thing, they ask for the wrong thing, everyone's confused, and then she loses her job and her health care.
Right.
So it's so much, but for every bad story, there's like 1,000 good stories. So just like with the birthing books, right? Like we want to read a lot of good, happy birthing stories. And we
Mm.
want to read a lot of stories about fertility treatments that were successful. And it's the same with this. It's like be prepared, of course, know the risks, but also assume it will go right.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
wish
And
I
I
had
think,
more on Canada though. I lived in Toronto for a while, but I don't have, and I went to law school there for a year, but I don't have like an in-depth knowledge on Canadian maternity law. Unfortunately, it's probably less eventful, I'm assuming.
yeah. I think there's a lot more just like happier people. Just give me my 12 months
Yeah,
and now they
yeah.
can take 18, right? If they want
My
to.
God.
No questions asked. I know I have it better than most people, so they don't put up
Hmm.
much of a stink.
Yeah, I think the lawyers there can definitely go jet skiing. That's
Right.
for sure.
Well, this was amazing. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. I know this is going to really just stir some conversations with our listeners. And for like the fertility journey is one of those instances where women are looking for control. They want to be able, to control something in the uncontrollable
Yes.
world of fertility. And this is something that you can prepare for.
Yes,
And I think that's really
exactly.
important
One
as
of
a
the
way
only
to
things.
help, right? To give
Yes,
you
you
something that
can
you can work on and
research.
advocate and research that, is still helping you on your journey, but isn't, taking you into that doom spiral of more of the same things. So hopefully
Yes.
this just opens up some conversations with partners, especially around what should we be looking at, what should we be looking for, and maybe opening up some thought processes for women who are perhaps thinking that they do need some accommodations and they've been scared to ask, or they're nervous about not knowing what their rights are, and
Mhm.
maybe didn't know they could ask for accommodations. And so
Yeah.
hopefully this just helps kind of open that door for some people. So
Kelsey,
thank
I
you.
forgot something really important. Just one
Oh,
moment.
share, please.
So, anxiety and depression are also disabilities in the workplace. So,
Mm,
if you feel anxious or depressed, overwhelmed, you can also go on stress leave, or you can ask for accommodations for mental health
yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something to think of for sure. I've had quite a
Mhm.
few clients get like remote work accommodations. So being able to either not go into the office at all for a certain set time, or commit to coming to the office 1 or 2 days a week. And if you have that ability in terms of flexibility with what your job entails, and you are feeling burnt out from your fertility journey, anxious, depressed, or as like you are, in and out of the office and that is bothering you enough with all the appointments, knowing that you can ask for that if you have that flexibility is something that clients have found to be really helpful for them.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for chatting. Hopefully we get to connect again soon. Did you shared your Instagram? Do you want to share?
Yes.
Is there anywhere else anyone can find you?
Yeah. So, the Mom Attorney is my Instagram. Um, and then the Liberated Mother Society is a program. I have a blog as well, the Mom Attorney. Hmm, that's about it. Yeah, I would
Okay.
say Instagram's my main thing. I'm an older millennial. So
Me too.
I
Everyone
never
keeps trying to get me off, and I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm sorry.
I know. And like TikTok shutting down, and I'm like, this has no impact on me. I
Right?
don't
I don't me
care.
neither. Oh my gosh, that's too funny. I'll make sure all
So
the links and everything are
yeah,
in
I
our
just
show
want
notes
to
for
give
everybody.
uh, a warning that I'm very political on my Instagram. So, so just something that I
Proceed
just
with
feel like,
caution.
yeah, yeah,
All right, Daphne, thank you
troll
so
at your
much.
own risk.
You're on your own risk, right? Thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yes, thank you.